Senior counselor to President Trump, now president of KA Consulting and a Fox News contributor, and Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee Democratic congressman and co-host of The Five. We are waiting. Welcome, first of all, to both of you. Thank you very much for being with us as we wait for the arrival of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine. He is going to have a meeting in the Oval Office with the president. Kellyanne, set the stage for us here. You have been to a lot of these kinds of meetings with heads of state, and this one under tremendous pressure in the middle of a war with Russia.
Yes, this one's quite different, Martha, because it seems that Vladimir Putin likes to annex or invade sovereign nations while Joe Biden is in the White House. Of course, he annexed Crimea in 2014 while Biden was the vice president, and he invaded Ukraine, another sovereign nation, in 2022 while Biden was president. So when Zelenskyy is here, I think the split screen Americans see this week is Joe Biden in triplicate. They saw him at the UN, totally ignoring the migrant crisis that was unfolding steps away in New York City, where he's under fire, under attack, really, by New York City Mayor Eric Adams and now even Governor Kathy Hochul, two people who very full-throatedly said they welcome migrants to the state of New York and now are turning their backs on that. The second part they saw with Joe Biden is him and his press secretary totally ignoring what we all see, a man-made crisis at the border, that Jay Johnson, the DHS secretary under President Obama, had said in 2014 with unaccompanied minors, about a third or a fourth of what we have now, that it was a crisis. It was, quote, the bane of his existence as DHS secretary. In 2019, Jay Johnson said that he can't imagine 4,000 crossings a day. It would overwhelm the system. Wow. Here we are in one day. And the third part they're seeing is what are President Biden's priorities? He's receiving the Ukrainian president again. I think we as a country open up our hearts without opening our checkbook infinitely. And I just think it's a president who's got the wrong priorities at all times. This is an important meeting for Zelenskyy. But I just want to say this about the polling. Joe Biden's approval rating on border security is among the worst on any of the 12 or 15 issues routinely tested, including the Fox News poll and other polling, Martha and Harold. I think this is important because people are going to believe what they see with their own two eyes, not what the Democrats are saying to them. Yeah. This is going to cost the Democratic Party precious political currency moving forward. The Democratic Party platform, smart Democrats like Harold ought to get in there and say the party platform talks about dreamers, thousands of dreamers, and says absolutely nothing about the millions of people who have crossed over. It approximates the population of 38 of our states. 38 of our states have a lower population than the number of migrants that have come over under Biden's watch.
Harold, your thoughts on this and what the president needs to do about this?
Well, thanks for having me on. I thought the last segment with Congressman Jordan, when you asked him the question, Martha, about what should be the objective with Ukraine, I think it's a simple one. You want to stop Russia from advancing in Ukraine, and two, you want to stop them from advancing to another country. I'm an American that wants to ensure that we are prioritizing our money and spending it appropriately. I cannot think of a foreign policy objective that would require my money, and I would be in support of spending tax dollars on ensuring that American troops do not have to go if indeed a NATO nation is invaded, which Article 5 would be activated. As it relates to this, what Kellyanne, I thought, eloquently spoke about regarding the border, she's right. This is inexcusable. This is a national security situation at our border. Now, two things can be true. The president should meet with Zelenskyy, but he should also be focused on the border and providing Congress should pass a bill adding resources, specifying what those resources should be spent on, and force this Senate and force this president to answer to it. The immigration bill that Mr. Jordan talked about was not a spending bill. In fact, Congress has adjourned. Republicans can't even agree on a set of spending bills. They rejected a defense bill just today. But I'm not here to be partisan. Both parties are to blame for where we are. It seems like we have a very, very small island of consensus builders. People in Washington and the Democrats and some Republicans talk about identifying as something. They ought to all identify as problem solvers and begin to fix the challenges on our border. Each side should compromise, build a wall, reform the asylum process, and let's help dreamers become citizens more quickly, those who are abiding by the rules and following the laws.
Yeah,
anything less, Martha, is just not good for our country, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is an American problem, and if we don't get to fixing it, it's only going to worsen.
So I'm hearing from you and from Kellyanne, this is a crisis that is unfolding on the border. She went back to Jay Johnson saying 4,000 is an untenable number. You can't manage 4,000. These guys and women are dealing with 10,000, and they are doing it in the most constructive, humane way possible with no guidance, no leadership. Now, I heard former President Trump said if he is reelected, he would send U.S. troops to block the border, to turn everyone back. You cannot come across. This is a crisis. Do you think, Kellyanne, that that's what should happen? And Harold, I want to hear from you as well on that. If you were president, would you say, okay, we need U.S. troops to secure the border, no one can come in?
Martha, we have sent U.S. troops and other American resources to protect the borders and the sovereignty of other nations for many decades. It's high time we did it for our own country. And the reason President Trump is saying that is some of the measures that Harold Ford is putting forth right now, we did in the Trump-Pence administration. Build the wall, that sounds familiar, but we were called racist and xenophobes and horrible, and we couldn't get Democrats to even come to the table on that. I was in those meetings in the Situation Room with newly elected Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin. They were all in there, and we couldn't get any of that. And so I'm glad that maybe smart Democrats and reasonable ones like Harold Ford Jr. are coming to the table, but he's got to talk to some of his former colleagues who are still there. This is a man-made crisis. People say it. And let me just say something very quickly. I'm sick and tired of hearing Democrats say it's compassionate to these people to come over here. It's not compassionate to those who already live here, and it sure the heck is not compassionate to them. All right, where are these kids? Where are these women?
84,000 children.
I mean, where are they? Are they okay?
And no,
are they
exactly. No one knows. So Harold, the first question that I want to circle back with you on is this question. Would you send U.S. troops to block the traffic coming across the border?
I likely would, Martha, and I would combine it with reforming this asylum process. As you know, that's the process that allows someone to come into the country. They say that they have terrible conditions where they live at home, and we give them basically a date in which this matter will be resolved. We need to reform that. You can't just come to the border and say things are bad at home. I want to come into the country, number one. Number two, I would be more likely to want to send troops or think about sending troops, Martha, because I think that the crossing of fentanyl and drugs and other trafficking is so pervasive and so bad. That's how I might be thinking creatively about how to use troops to do that. I think reforming the asylum process would very likely cause a lot of people not to be allowed into the country.
Well, I mean, something like 80%, more than 85% don't have asylum claims, but they get to stay anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Harold.
Well, most of them do have asylum. They're claiming that they have an asylum claim. That's
but
how
I'm saying legitimate. Once adjudicated, legitimate asylum claims, very large percentage do not have it.
So I would invest a lot, Martha, to your point, I would invest a lot in trying to adjudicate those much more quickly. We shouldn't allow weeks, months, and sometimes years to lapse, knowing that some of these claims are not legitimate or don't rise to the threshold. Look, there's an answer. There are answers to these questions. In both parties, I would argue Democrats probably have a little more of the responsibility because we're in the White House, but both parties will have to share in finding a solution to this challenge. A wall alone won't change, is not going to solve this problem. An asylum process reform alone won't do it either. It's going to take a package of ideas, and hopefully we'll see some maturity and
I think everybody listening can agree with that. It was interesting. Karine Jean-Pierre was asked a question about these centers, because this is one of the ideas that came out of the White House that was supposed to happen, where you can put your asylum claim through at the first country that you come to, which is supposed to be the way that it works, except the border's open. So there's no reason to stop in those countries at those centers. And she was asked by a reporter, I'm not sure who it was, what's going on with that program that you heralded from that podium not that long ago? And she said something along the lines of, well, you'd have to ask the centers. I'm not really sure what's happening with that. So it feels like we hear these empty ideas that don't have any teeth and that don't change anything, Kellyanne. And people just feel, I mean, I hear it when I travel and around the country. They don't understand what's going on. I mean, you can't just walk into another country, and yet here you can, and it happens all day long, long.
By the way, nobody looks like they're worried about being on camera. Nobody looks like they're worried about being apprehended. It's, I think, the reporter earlier, Bill Malugin, who's doing unbelievable work at the border. And but for Fox News and your cameras there, Martha, we wouldn't even see this. We wouldn't even know this. But for Donald Trump in 2015, surfacing illegal immigration and, more importantly, border security, which brings together a lot of suburban women and independents and young people who aren't really excited about, quote, immigration reform, they get really animated and electrified about border security. But Martha, Donald Trump took an issue that was mired in single digits. It wasn't even registering in the polls hardly. Trade was an asterisk. Immigration, illegal immigration was 1%, 2%, and said this is an economic issue. It's a national security issue. It's all the things Harold Ford Jr. is saying today. And for the White House to deny the efficacy of policies, these centers that they were promoting before, tells you how unserious they are. What did she do? She was asked a very smart question by Fox News' Peter Doocy. She attacked him, attacked the question, and attacked Republicans. So I would love for Harold Ford Jr. to encourage people in his party to think and speak as he does and solve these problems. But we can't even, from the podium representing the White House, we can't get a serious response. They've done more to attack, quote, MAGA Republicans, whatever that is, than they have to attack this problem everybody sees right in front of them. It's going to cost them elections. It absolutely is.
You know, I remember when Governor Abbott, Harold, put trucks across the border. He has put razor wire across the border. He's trying to discourage people from crossing into the state that he governs. And it's not just because he doesn't want them to come in. It's also because people are drowning in the river. Children are coming on their own. They're being handed over to people who, God knows who that person is, and nobody seems to be able to take the time or have the ability to figure it out. So it is not safe for these individuals to cross over. But the administration has taken down the razor wire and forced back the trucks that he was attempting to create some kind of border on his state. What do you think about that?
Well, if I were the head of a state, if I were the governor of a state and had these kinds of challenges, I would try to be as creative and try to offer constitutionally protected ideas. I think what Governor Abbott did in sending migrants around the country, some objected to it, but I understand if your towns are being overrun. My mayor here in New York, I live in New York, I thought rightly complained about some of the things, or rightly is complaining about some of the challenges we're facing. Imagine if you were a border town and you were having people come across. We're experiencing here in New York several thousand, but imagine if you had several thousand a day coming. I may have my numbers off a bit, but they certainly have a lot more coming across the border.
100,000 in New York.
These are, again, there are answers here that are screaming out.
Millions in Texas.
And we should be trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.